I tried. I really tried for 20 long chapters. But when I saw that there were 100 more of such chapters, I just couldn't continue. So that's where I'm going to leave the audiobook at. So luckily for you, this review is going to be spoiler free. Or, well, I'll touch on what the first 20 chapters talk about, but that would just be the premise. So I don't know if there's a big grand reveal at the end. I'm sure there is, but I haven't gone through the summary of the entire book to know if it's worth getting to that point because, well, first of all, this Dan Brown novel, Secret of Secrets, is larger than any of his previous works, I'm sure. And my main critique would again just be that I could see the same patterns, same characters, and same punchy dialogue repeating. Some chaos happens in a major European city, and then Langdon has to scramble through his religious symbology knowledge to rescue his people. And then there is an evil villain, mysterious in his ways, who's trying to thwart his plans, and it was just a bit too predictable for me. Let's get into the plot itself. So, in this story, Robert Langdon is with Catherine Solomon. I think she was introduced in the previous book as a noetic scientist. I don't know if it's an actual field where research is happening. Well, serious research at least, but I was already skeptical. And the plot basically deals with consciousness and precognition, clairvoyance, something of the sorts, let's say, from what I could gather. Dan Brown uses the same old techniques of using conspiracy theories and fringe experiments to justify some ridiculous superstitions or some long forgotten traditional practices, let's say. But in today's scientific world, I don't think any of this holds much merit. It's pure pseudoscience. Well, moving past that, let's assume that whatever he says is true. I didn't see anything new with the characters or the plot either. Like I briefly mentioned, it's the same old unexpected thing happening, and then all of a sudden something else happens that you again don't expect. We are still in the build off phase in the first few chapters, but you can see the pattern so clearly if you have read any of his other books. Another critique would again be that Prague as a city might have its own niche history, but I'm not too familiar with it, and it's of course not as popular as Florence or Rome or the Vatican, for instance, which we are all familiar with from his other works. I like the New York scenes because I've been to a bunch of those places, but again, nothing to write home about. A big deal is made of the avant-garde art style of Prague and its fortifications and castles from 16th century or even before that. But again, I'm not too familiar with the place. Maybe if I lived there, it would intrigue me a bit more. I always associated that kind of thing more with Berlin than with Prague. But anyway, you have the classic usage of some of its most popular places in Prague as the setting for a few of the happenings. Most importantly, the Vltava River that runs through downtown Prague, through the city center. And it's again some ridiculous plot points that I just couldn't get over. Imagine this, there's this scene very early on where Langdon jumps from his high rise hotel, the Four Seasons Hotel in Prague, straight into the river in the middle of winter. I'm not kidding. He jumps out at 7 a.m. There are no broken bones, no injuries whatsoever. He just has an army blanket around him and shrugs it off and calmly takes a hot shower after doing this stunt for whatever reason. It's just a few of these things are so irritating that I just couldn't get past it. Maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind. Let's see what else I've written. Time, soul, yeah. We talked a bit about consciousness and it residing in our minds. Now, I've researched this topic myself. Well, research is a heavy word to throw around here, but I regularly follow Sam Harris's podcast on this exact topic and a bunch of other science podcasts. And Well, I know that brain mapping and neuron mapping, when something happens, how your brain interprets it and how it can give a response, all of this is a very exciting field of research. I understand that. But to imply that from these impulses or from the mapping of them, you somehow prove precognition because of a fringe experiment where people were able to predict whatever images they were about to see, is a huge leap that anyone with half a brain cell would outright dismiss. If you are going that far, why not just call this book a fantasy? That's what irks me the most. Dan Brown insists in all of his interviews and promotional videos and material that the classic quote, all of the organizations in this book are real, all of the experiments are real. Why do you have to do that? Just call the book a fantasy and be done with it. You don't have to go around finding these particularly niche experiments to fit your narrative and to put forth your preconceived assumptions. I don't know, it just felt a bit forced. Let's see what else I have. Yeah, I also talked about how it was more of the same stuff with classic Dan Brown. If you have read one book, you have read all of them. Then I've written tension building by trickle down information, lots of filler stuff. What was I thinking about? Oh yeah, so there's this villain, Golem, right? He's the villain in this story, and the way the prose is written, it's it's weird to say the least. Even the minutest of details are used as a cliffhanger. I'll give you an example. So, in one of the first few chapters, the way Golem treats an image in his room, just the wording of it is so strange. He would write something like, I have to protect her, where there is no context on what he's talking about, but it's still presented as something interesting and mysterious. Just say it's the image of Catherine. Just say that the golem is there to protect Catherine's interests. We know it. You don't have to trickle down that info to us as the reader when we already know that Catherine is missing, and you don't have to go around adding mystery to every single thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I have outgrown my Dan Brown reading years and it no longer appeals to me as much as it did at one point, or maybe the story itself is so bland that I couldn't connect to it. But I recall reading Da Vinci Code, even before that, Deception Point, such incredible books. But maybe it's just that I don't like that kind of airport book read anymore. I need something a bit more serious, let's say, where the author doesn't treat his readers like a child. What else do I have? Excessive Deus Ex Machina. Oh, yeah. Well, it's a classic Dan Brown trope, which I've already said too many times that he repeats the same thing again. So it's the same thing here as well. Nothing new. When I was reading this book, I was also watching this anime Psycho-Pass where I came across this quote. Books are not something that you just read words in. They're also a tool to adjust your senses. When I'm not feeling well, there are times that I can't take in what I read. And this just connected to me because I just couldn't take in what I was reading with Dan Brown. Maybe you'll have better luck. There are books that I can take in smoothly even when I'm not feeling well. Right. I try to think why. It might be something like mental tuning. What's important when you tune is the feeling of the paper that you're touching with your fingers and the momentary stimulation your brain receives when you turn pages. And I just didn't get any thrill in turning the pages of this book. I don't even feel like going into the other characters. There's this Czech tough police guy, Janešek, who has this classic shouting in Czech because it's a foreign land, but then immediately followed by the English translation guy. Then there is the attaché Harris, who is from the American embassy because Langdon is such a hotshot and so is Catherine. Is it really such a big deal? I don't know. Maybe I didn't read the chapters after this and it's explained in more detail, but I just couldn't. I'll just wait for the Tom Hanks movie to come out. Anyway, to wrap up my review, I don't know what to say other than the things that I've already repeated way too many times. The book is repetitive. If you like Dan Brown and you really want to read more of the same, then maybe you'll enjoy this, but I didn't, so I wouldn't recommend this. Go read Da Vinci Code again. At least the Vatican and Paris are a more intriguing setting than Prague. Thank you for listening.